as we've been sort of saying, how divisive things are and how disconnected we can become. And of course, the contributing factor here is our past conditioning. And sort of we're obviously aware of all the conditioning that creates division, social conditioning through religion, through race, caste, wealth, all these aspects of life that seem to separate and bring in judgment and different levels and disconnection. And these are all, of course, past events. They all come through our socializing and education system. And they seem to get embedded. It seems like the brain has this habit of recording, and it's recording our responses or the residue of our experiences gets recorded in our brain. It's an incredible machine. And we don't seem to have any control over. There's no delete button. And which is this ability of the brain to record is fantastic for our sort of daily activities and our learning things, and we wouldn't be able to find our way home or do all the things we do without the brain being able to do that, to be able to record and remember past events. But when we look at the inner world of when it's recording psychologically, then we sort of start to see the difficulties that arise and the divisions that it creates. So that we, obviously example is we develop an image of somebody through past interaction, and that image we carry over to our present interaction. It distorts the way we relate to some different degrees, and sometimes it's just totally image relating to image. There's no real connection there at all. So if we reflect on the depth of this conditioning, which I was thinking about it the other day, and it seemed like not only is it what we have acquired in our lifetimes, but somehow I think we've carried over generations of conditioning. And you can speculate how that comes about. Is it more in the DNA than we realise, or is it through some sort of finer, subtler rebirth type situation? I don't know, but it seems to me that I looked at my children from the very day they were born. They already had a personality traits and things embedded in their behaviour and the differences between them before they were sort of really exposed to a lot of social conditioning. But of course, all that is added on top. So if I'm looking at the conditioning and saying, well, yeah, this is what the brain does, it records. And that, unfortunately, then becomes a habit of being present when I have a new experience, that there's this overlay and distortion from my past experiences that the brain has recorded. Then the inquiry question is it possible to be free? To be free of that conditioning? In other words, is it possible to be free of the past and to meet that present experience without an interpretation from the past? And if so, how would that come about? Since we don't seem to have an ability to delete those past impressions, it would be fine if we could just go, well, that's it. I'm not going to take any notice of those anymore, and I'm just going to erase all my personal history. But it seems to me that I haven't met anybody who's been able to do that. And is it possible, you could say, well, I can't erase all the past. Can I stop recording now? No, even then, I think the brain is such a vital part of the brain, such a habit that has come over from the physical into the psychological. I'm not sure we can just even stop recording. So we're still looking into that question. Well, where's the freedom? How can we be free of that? How can we step out of that pattern so that we can meet life in a really creative, free, undistorted, connection with life? So we can see clearly. In other words, if we can see into the truth of things as they actually are now without bringing an interpretation to it that's come from the past. So one option here, I think, well, for a start, intellectual understanding doesn't seem to work. I can reflect on it and say, yeah, well, I can see, that sounds fair enough to me, that freedom would be letting go of the past. And I've read it, the Buddha's teachings, and not to cling. But of course, we can say that over and over again. It's a mantra. It doesn't seem to work. So we've got to look at some other process here, a depth of understanding that's experiential. That we've seen it so clearly in our own behaviour. So there's a really clear, deep insight here into the whole process. Because I'm unable to force myself to let go. Because the forcer, as we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, the forcer is part of the conditioning. And he's not going to let go of himself or herself. Because that's the past that we're holding on to. The view we hold of ourselves is part of that conditioning. So coming to that chasm, if you like, coming to that space where I see the restrictions, I see there's nothing I can deliberately do to let go, but I have seen the process. I've seen the truth of that, how conditioning, how the past interferes with how I'm relating in the present. I've experienced the pain that has come through the worry and the anxiety. And I've seen where that's come from, embedded in my past experience. And it seems when I've seen it in that depth, then that conditioned response seems to fall away. It's not that I have to stop recording. It's just that there's been a shift. And the shift is that there's been a natural letting go. And it's severed that connection with that past. And what's left, of course, is a real fresh, immediate as I say, creative, connected response. So when we explore and reflect on conditioning, on all the influences that have come to us from the past, there is the tendency and the habit to say, well, this I need to get rid of. This I need to change. And here's the crux that's just creating so much tension, because it's the conditioner. I can't emphasize this enough. That as soon as we hear the voice that says, I should be, I shouldn't, or then we go, there's that conditioned past. There's that voice from the past entering in. It's the intellectual, conceptual view. And it will not be freeing. So it's only when I come to that, in that deep seeing, where I'm stopped in my tracks. Boom. It all falls away. But we really have to take care to notice. So it's the seeing into our behaviour, not with the seer that should see, but just noticing, without bringing any force or belief or process. There's nothing other than the seeing. And of course, that's so difficult, because the habit is to do something, to fix something. So this is following on the theme for the last 3 weeks or whatever. Yeah. And just noticing how that conditioning, how those views, how those opinions, how those ideas I have about things, about myself, how I should be, what's wrong with me, how all that creates this division, fragmentation in consciousness, and really limits my ability to live freely and with love. Because we all can see how divisive views and opinions are out there in the world, in the outer world. How race, religion, politics, how this creates such fragmentation. But not so easy to see that it's actually happening within ourselves. And the inner is the outer. We've created that fragmentation within our own consciousness. And then that deep inquiry question, is it possible to be free of all that? To live in a radically different way? Because this is the only real change that can happen. In a way, when we look at the conditioning, as I said, it's generational. It's also the whole history of life, I reckon, is in our consciousness. We are humanity, we are the world. Because we share that past conditioning. And until we make a radical shift, until we free ourselves of those patterns, nothing is ever going to change, outwardly or inwardly. That division is going to continue. That tension. And even acknowledging that conditioning connects us all. How can we judge someone else? How can we blame other people? We are all conditioned and all caught in that conditioning to some degree. And hopefully some of us can step out of that and relate in a really direct and compassionate way with each other, with our society and with the planet. Enough. Thank you.